Welcome back to the Tydarium Hangar. This is Mike, and today we're going to talk about Perceptor and all toys made from G1 to Masterpiece. Yes, this is the guy that fears that the wounds are fatal. Let's get into talking about Perceptor. We're going to start back with the Takara Micro Change line with the M20. Originally, he had black paint deco, and yeah, he's a pretty cool looking figure. And that's where he started. That's where the roots of this figure began. Here's another shot of the box, and very interesting. We're going to get into some G1, and it starts right now. Before we get to the actual G1, here's a prototype. So this is what it initially was going to look like with the coloring. They changed a few things, so we ended up getting what we got with G1. And here is a picture of the packaging of the G1 figure. Gotta love that G1 packaging. So the G1 toy itself was an excellent toy. For the G1 time frame, this had far more articulation than the average Transformer figure. When you look at the fact that the way it transforms, the way you have to move the legs, the way the arms move, all of that contributed to a very articulated figure, one of the better figures, in my opinion, for playability as a kid. But yeah, he turns into a microscope. A lot of people use it as a cannon. The microscope itself only magnified by 14 times, and some say 10 times. Well, anyway, around there. Because of the crude nature, it is a cheap toy. Versus a higher end, more expensive microscope. So Perceptor was reissued many times. We have the Japanese Encore reissue. We have the 25th anniversary reissue. We have the Platinum Edition reissue that also included Blaster and some cassettes and some actual slides for him to use. So interesting reissues there. The thing about all of these reissues is they really use the same basic mold, the same color scheme as the G1, and so you got basically the same toy. Then we got the E-Hobby Destron Magnificus. And the Destron Magnificus is an homage, or pays homage, to the Takara Micro Change line. And they also included another figure with it, and they called him Ganymede, and he was complete with hand-to-hand combat weapons. In the early 2000s, we saw the Heroes of Cybertron figures come out. We got a Heroes of Cybertron Perceptor. Japan had the Super Collection figures, which look very similar to this, so I don't know if they stole from each other and just imported it over here. And these are small figures, even smaller than what we're referring to as Legends nowadays, as the Legends figures that are in the third party. These are smaller than that. I don't know if they would fit, if any of them would truly fit on a Legend shelf. We did have Decoy figures that were sort of pack-ins back in the 80s in the G1 line, and then they came out with a modern version of the Decoy, which was much more representative of the character. And something that most people wouldn't even consider a Transformer, but it's there. They had the Robot Heroes version of the figures, and these were just, I don't think these have any articulation at all. If they did, it would only be in the shoulders, but I don't think there was any. And they're very small and a little bit super deformed, but hey, it's a thing. Now, Perceptor also had Energon and Armada versions, both of which were way off from any of the source material for the G1, and eventually we got back to. For a while they were selling a really small figure as a Legions figure. And here he is in the Legions size, Legions class, says Robots in Disguise. And he was very small, almost like a Micro Master size figure, transformed into some sort of a tank, getting away from the whole microscope idea. They carried over that truck mode concept into the Classics line, which at the time they were calling Reveal the Shield. This line actually gave us a robot mode that looked sort of G1-esque. It still looked pretty good, and to this day is one of the better Perceptors that's around. Now, of course, we got the Japanese counterpart released with the United line at the time, and it had a slightly different paint scheme and paint deco, a little bit darker than the US one, and I gotta say it looks a little bit more metallic. Getting into the Titan Returns figure. For Perceptor is one of the best looking Chug Perceptors made to date, and a couple of things very different about this one. Most of the modern figures are bigger than their G1 counterparts. So this one's actually smaller. That has to do with the fact that Perceptor was a larger figure when he was released in the 80s. The other thing is, Perceptor never really was a headmaster. So to put him out as a headmaster in the Titan Returns line, a lot of people had a problem with that. But those problems aside, this is a great looking figure, scales well with the other deluxe figures that are out there. The Titan Returns version also brought us back to the microscope, back to the G1 idea in the beginning. And I like that. I think that is a great idea to go back to the roots, and that's a direction that Hasbro's going right now on into Earthrise. And the Titan Returns version of Perceptor is actually getting to be very expensive on the secondary market. And of course they released the Japanese version, which had a slightly different hue, slightly different coloring to him. He also came with Ramhorn, which is just a redeco of Ramhorn, which actually really cool repaint of Ramhorn. And he was repainted and repurposed for a Golden Lagoon set. And still a great looking figure, a great looking mold, and they did a shiny reflective gold paint, and then they had some gold colored plastic, so when you transform it, you don't chip all of that gray paint. Now getting into the third party figures. And we're going to start with Planet X's Asclepius. Now this is a very affordable option for a figure, for I guess you could say a masterpiece version, a third party version of Perceptor. Now he is very stylized and he's a bit short to be considered a masterpiece figure. And he does not transform into a microscope. Transforms into some sort of a futuristic space tank. All that taken into account, he is still a very cool looking figure and an interesting representation of Perceptor. Fans Toys Tesla. Fans Toys Tesla is renowned as the best version of Perceptor that we have gotten so far. Checks off all of the boxes, G1 aesthetic, transforms into a microscope, and fits the size very well for a masterpiece figure. Now that doesn't mean that it's a perfect figure, and there's a lot of complaints about this figure. First off, people complain about the face sculpt, the head sculpt on him. People complain about the alleged brittle plastic. Of course, I have not experienced that on my copy, but a lot of other people have. So many that it's not a 1 or a 2 off. It is a multitude of people that have complained about poor plastic on this figure. That doesn't change the fact that he still is a great looking figure and still fits in on a masterpiece shelf with a masterpiece aesthetic and the build. And many collectors pay high dollar, anywhere between $300 and $500 for this guy, yes. And they want him to be reissued. Now there's rumor, and this is rumor, that the mold is broken, lost, damaged, or something, and they would not make him again. Now here's the thing, Fans Toys has started a new trend where they do a 2.0. But I think that this is one of the figures that has the most potential for more competition for other companies to step in and do even better than Tesla. And for all those Legends collectors out there, there is a set by Mr. Moon that has a Perceptor and a Blaster. It's sold as a set, they were never sold separately, but both of these figures were just slight redesigns of the Hot Soldiers Soundwave. And it's ingenious how we have different transformations, different panels, all based off of about 60% of all of the same parts. Really interesting how you can have one turn into a boombox and the other turn into a microscope. Faithful to all the G1 representations of these figures. Maybe in the future we're going to see another company make a Perceptor. Let me know who your favorite Perceptor is. Let me know if there's any that are missing off of this list. And of course, like and subscribe. Tiger Hanger out.